What's going on, guys? I hope you guys are having a fantastic week, fantastic day. I am super excited to announce yet another Grail card that I picked up. This is a really exciting, humbling time in the hobby for me. I feel like I don't even deserve cards like this, being in the hobby only a couple of years. But I'm really excited to announce this card. I'm really excited to dork out on this card over the next 10, 20 minutes. And just go over kind of the origins of this card. Now, I picked up this card and another card that I had already talked to you guys about. Here we have the PSA 9 first edition Venusaur that I got a little while ago. And this was the other card that came in that packaging. And I really wanted to, when I got the cards, I wanted to just make like a short or a clip just showing me unboxing the cards for the first time. It was a private deal, so I wanted there to be some proof of that and have it on camera. But I decided, just trust the process. Everything did end up working out really well. I got a really good deal on these cards. Now I'm showing them to you guys. I've had both of these cards now for a couple weeks, if not even like a whole month. But I wanted to figure out the right time to kind of talk about them, announce them, and I just kind of enjoyed them before talking about them first. So these are very special to me. For a lot of high-end Pokemon card collectors, it's just another card, but to me, these are like some of my ultimate collection goals coming to fruition. So here we go. I am so stoked to talk about this card, this Pokemon. This has been a dream goal of mine for a long time. And the last one I had of these, I sold at Collecticon. It was part of a big trade so that I could get the Gold Star Rayquaza. So I finally have this beautiful water type Turtle Boy again. Here we go. Boom! We got the first edition Blastoise first edition base set and a PSA 9. It's not a thick stamp, it's a thin stamp, but it still looks absolutely beautiful. And this card, just like the Venusaur, so these came together. How fitting was that? And I believe these cards were collected at the same time and pulled at the same time back in the day. God, these cards are so undervalued in comparison to Charizard, their counterpart, kind of the ultimate fanboy card. And this one's a PSA 5 that hopefully I will replace with the 9 at some point. But it's just nice to finally, I gotta put these up together because it's just nice to finally have all three of these in unison together. The three first edition base set starters at the end of their evolution lines. Absolutely menacing trio. Okay, a lot of fun stuff to get into here. First things first, I want to point out that this card, just like the Venusaur, has a red ink dot error. I don't know if we're going to be able to see that, but I'm going to try and show you guys. The backs of both of these are extremely, extremely clean. I think they knocked it because of centering, but you guys might be able to see right there. There's a little red dot, a little red speck. Right there. I know my fingers are nasty, but there's a little red speck right there. And that is what we call a factory error. That is the red dot error. So this is actually, they're actually both error cards, which is kind of cool. I'll show you guys. Well, the front, you can kind of tell that it's a little off center. You can tell it's a little chunky on this side, a little thinner on this side, chunky down below, thinner up top. So, and then here's the back, which is pretty much flawless. The back is extremely clean. I'm very happy with the card. And let's go ahead and talk about price. And then we get into all the fun stuff, which may be boring stuff for a lot of people that watch the channel, but I think it'll be informative and it'll be interesting. And if anybody has any other facts or any other weird origin stories about Blastoise or stuff that can be added to the discussion, this is a big deal. We're talking about one of the ultimate Grail cards for me, and one of the all-time most favorited Pokemon ever, right there with Charizard, I would say, if not Venusaur. And Blastoise is extremely iconic. If you have any information you want to add to this video, leave a comment down below. I rarely ask that, but I really do want to form more of a discussion for some of these vintage cards. And I'm really excited because as we move on in my collecting journey, there are going to be other vintage cards from sets that I haven't talked about for a very long time. They've kind of been forgotten in my binders, but I want to go into those sets, talk about auctions, talk about those cards specifically. So we're going to be giving a lot of love to vintage cards over the next couple of months here. But yeah, so Blastoise, origin story behind Blastoise. Oh, and then pricing. Okay. So I got the Venusaur for $1,900 and I got the Blastoise for $2,900. Now, Blastoise in a PSA 9 typically sells for around $4,200, maybe $3,700 to $4,200. I was not really going to pay anywhere near $4,000. I think it's honestly a $3,000 card. So for me, $2,900 was hitting the nail on the head. Although I do know we had a recent modern cert Blastoise in a PSA 9 that sold for $4,200. Which makes me feel great, despite the fact that modern cert grails usually go for a little bit more because they are freshly graded, and that matters. People care about that. I care about that. But needless to say, I didn't get any kind of steal, but I did get a really good deal in comparison to people that are just looking at these cards, bidding on them, paying market prices, not thinking much about it. And even at $4,200, I think that this card and Venusaur are massively undervalued in comparison to Charizard. Okay, there is no reason why these cards can't be at least half of the value of what Charizard is in a PSA 9, right? Charizard in a PSA 9 running for, hailed as one of the ultimate Grail cards, running for, in my opinion, $16,000 in a PSA 9. I think that these cards each should be maybe Venusaur closer around $6,000 or $7,000, maybe $5,000, and Blastoise, which is coming near that number. People trying to get $5,000 for Blastoise. I think Blastoise though is probably closer to $7,000 or $8,000 truly in its value. And I think if we see another kind of boom or another, era where Pokemon is extremely popular and it becomes a big fad again, I think you're going to see those prices. It might be a couple of years, but I think it's kind of crazy that Charizard is just so much more. When Blastoise and Venusaur both, these illustrations are incredible. One thing, I don't fully know all the history behind Charizard. I do want to just admit that when I bought this PSA 5 Charizard, see if it'll zoom in on that. When I first bought the PSA 5 Charizard, I was just worried about its authenticity. I wasn't even really thinking about the origin of Charizard or the story behind Charizard. When we replace this PSA 5 with a PSA 9 or maybe even a PSA 10 in some wild fantasy, when we do that, I will be speaking on the origin of Charizard and kind of the whole story behind Charizard, because what am I as a Charizard fan if I can't even divulge into all of the history behind Charizard? Such an iconic Pokemon. Okay, Blastoise, let's get into it. Most people don't know this. I didn't know this. This is a lot of new information, but I decided, moving forward with this channel, I really do geek out on a lot of these Pokemon. I think early on it was about nostalgia, catching up, getting my collection in order, buying the things that I wanted to buy, a lot of FOMO. Now my collection feels very refined. It feels like what it should feel like at 3 years into it. But I want to give a lot more respect and time towards some of these cards and not just go like, oh, I got an absolutely sick card. Check out what it is. Let's talk about how dope this card is, what they're typically going for, market prices, money, money, money. Let's talk about the cards and what makes them special, why they're so beautiful and incredible. So Blastoise, and pretty much all of these starter Pokemon, you've got Squirtle, Charmander, and Bulbasaur. Those are, it's speculated that they were kind of chosen as the starter Kanto Pokemon to get the ball rolling because they were the most common Japanese kids' pet at the time, right? You had toads, you had turtles, and you had lizards, right? So that's where I think these come into play. Even though Charizard is not really a lizard, is more of a dragon, I think it's kind of, you can assume that, the inspiration comes from, early on, Satoshi collecting cards and then Ken helping to design these cards. I'm sure a lot of it was based off of tradition, culture, and just the history of creatures, and collecting creatures as pets. And so you get kind of the toad, the turtle, and the lizard. Okay, so a lot of people think that Blastoise is pretty much the combination of a tank, or at least this is what I found on the internet, a tank and a turtle. So Blastoise could be based off of actual kaiju, which is a form of massive monstrosity-sized, skyscraper-sized monsters. When we think of Godzilla or Pacific Rim, we think of kaiju, right? So, and a lot of people think, I want to say Gamora. I'm going to mess that up, but I want to say Gamora, which was a turtle-esque kind of ripoff of Godzilla. A lot of people think, and that was, early 90s, maybe even before the 90s, we saw some of these kaiju, which were kind of these turtle-like monstrous creatures. A lot of people think that has something to do with this big turtle guy. And actually, despite what size you actually think Blastoise is, a lot of people don't realize that Blastoise is actually only like 5 feet tall, which means Blastoise is actually really short. Blastoise is shorter than me. He might actually be huge in size and like girth, I guess you could say, but Blastoise is actually tiny. And we've got the stats here. Shellfish Pokemon, length 5'3". I thought it was more like 5'4", 5'5", but 5'3". He's really short, 189 pounds. He's a big boy. But a brutal Pokemon with pressurized water jets on its shell, which are used at high-speed tackles. Now, the Gamora was able to retract in its shell, just like Blastoise was in early Japanese anime or movies that featured this creature. It has very similar characteristics as Blastoise. Now, where the cannons came from is still a mystery to me. I didn't read anything on where the cannons came from or the idea that he was going to have water jets on his back. That's something that still feels like it's foreign, and maybe if someone could shed light on that, they could share with that. But very interesting story. So you have Squirtle and you have Wartortle. And if you'll notice between Squirtle and Wartortle, and Squirtle is actually less looking, his characteristics are less of a turtle and more of a tortoise because he's very rounded. But Squirtle and Wartortle look very similar in their design. Wartortle is a little bit darker. What we see with all of the Kanto Pokemon is their stage 1 evolution, their stage 1 evolution. So Ivysaur, Charmeleon, and Wartortle have slightly darker color schemes. This is something that appears throughout all of them. They become a little more aggressive. They become a little more ferocious, and maybe even, especially in the case of Charmeleon, a little more teenager-like, right? They are the teenager stages of these Pokemon. But one thing that doesn't make a lot of sense that I'm sure a lot of you have wondered, and before I forget, because I am going to forget, a lot of people see Blastoise and Bowser as being very similar. And the fact that Mario had come out around the same time or before Pokemon makes you wonder, was some of that inspiration of Blastoise actually from Bowser? They do look very similar with the massive shells on their backs, but feel free to correct me on that. I'm no expert. I'm just loving to share some of this information with you guys and nerding out, which is something that I don't typically do when talking about cards. But I wanted to get my facts right. So you'll notice that Wartortle, guys, hush. Making a video. My dogs like to bark every time I make a good video, and this is a good video in my opinion. So yeah, I was gonna do a mystery mail day, but I was just like, nah, dude, you've been wanting to talk about this card for so long. I'm so stoked to finally have one. You'll notice that Squirtle and Wartortle don't really fully, I would say Squirtle maybe emulates Blastoise a little bit more than Wartortle does, but Wartortle has kind of the wings on the top of his head. It really doesn't look, and then his tail being kind of feather-like, it really doesn't look the same as Blastoise. They don't really pair together. I mean, it works, but they don't quite pair together, and there's a reason for this. Originally, Blastoise is actually a combination, a fusion, if you will, of two separate evolution lines. So Squirtle and Wartortle were actually going to be their own evolution that was not going to be Blastoise, and Blastoise had a what they call a pre-evolution line, which I think really is just a way for them to say a baby evolution, which would be so epic and actually kind of like I can roll with that, right? Like Blastoise is a 6 starter Pokemon, Venusaur is a 6 starter Pokemon, but there's so many different ways it could have gone, and I'm glad that they went with these designs. I'm glad that these were how the cards were illustrated and these are the Pokemon they were picked. But I think there's actually even proof of this, and it's not just theorized, but there's early kind of concept artworks done with I think Staryu and the original Blastoise, I guess you could say, and I don't think it looks anything like Blastoise. It looks a lot more similar to Wartortle, which would make sense. A lot of people have even made artworks to be what they think Blastoise should have looked like in comparison to Wartortle, and it's a completely different ball game. It does not even compare. I'm really happy that they chose to go with Blastoise and they fused those evolution lines, but just imagine, Blastoise could have had like a baby evolution, essentially. Like it could have just been an evolved form of a baby evolution. That would have been really cool. And maybe I'm not getting those facts right. I'm just sharing what I perceived, right? Trying to absorb all the information and then regurgitate it in a way that's understandable and fun to everybody isn't always easy to do. But we have Bowser's maybe possible inspiration. We have the two evolutions and kind of being fused into just going with, like, they kind of just swapped out what their original illustration was, I think, for what Blastoise would have been, right? Because Blastoise wasn't Blastoise at the time. They hadn't really put a name to what the Pokemon were. It was just the concept art, and Blastoise was the name. So here we have now Blastoise and the illustration to go along with the name, and it does look a lot different than Wartortle. I think they really did a good job on Blastoise. I think he looks absolutely phenomenal. I would not change a single thing. I think, and I think the cannons on his back really make Blastoise look completely different from anything else in the anime, considering the fact, in the TCG, considering the fact that almost no other Pokemon has cannons or guns of any kind. I think Dreadnaught's probably the closest you get to having something like Blastoise, but it's still, there's been no other kind of turtle Pokemon or water type Pokemon or any Pokemon for that matter that has had kind of cannons on its back. So it really differentiates Blastoise and makes him look aggressive, armored, like a tank. So it makes sense that the inspiration could have come from maybe a couple different things, like no idea is entirely original, like everything comes from somewhere. So it is believable that the ideas came from maybe earlier video games like Mario or the Kaiju, which is kind of Gamera. I'm not exactly sure how to say that. Kind of the ripoff, dubbed as the ripoff of Godzilla. But it's pretty cool, all of these inspirations together kind of blending in to what is Blastoise today. I'm trying to think, what else did I learn about Blastoise today? I feel like that's just about everything. But it's interesting how all the starters are from like common Japanese pets, I think, and then how their stage 1 evolution is, a darker color than all of them and kind of share those same similarities of, being the teenage version of those Pokemon. It's pretty incredible looking over the history of these cards. And let's see, what else about this beautiful boy here? I'm trying to I almost missed this entirely, and it wouldn't have done the video justice. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yes, you heard it right. Along with Gamora and Godzilla and, some kind of radiation, some kind of atomic fallout between, I think it was like the story behind Godzilla is like Soviet Russia and the US. It's the same thing with Gamora, and there's a war and a fallout, and the creature gets awakened again. Or is created through, some kind of mutation. That's kind of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is pre-Pokemon. So you kind of got to respect this theory as well. That, these little turtles, which were mutated and have ninja skills that they learned from their ninja rat professor. There's a lot of theory and speculation that Blastoise came from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I can definitely bite on that, right? There's only so many places we can take references from turtles or, water type reptilian creatures. There's really not a whole lot to go off of. But I definitely want to honor the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle thing, because there is actually, and maybe it's just Pokemon in the anime made an episode like this, where there's multiple Squirtles or Wartortles. I think it's Squirtles. There are multiple Squirtles, and they work together to put out a fire that Team Rocket has created. But there's 4 of them, right? Just like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, this is either a tribute, and it's just like some fun that they did making the anime, or they're actually, it's their way of kind of putting in the hint that they did get some of that inspiration from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. A lot of this stuff is, reading stuff on Reddit and, getting ideas and seeing what other people are saying, but there are some really strong theories and some other theories that aren't so strong. But overall, I think it took a lot of inspiration to get to these drawings, and I don't think they just came purely out of one person's mind. I think they were the combination of multiple ideas, multiple inspirations that have brought us to this creature today. Now, unlike Venusaur, who was truly, I think, inspired by a prehistoric toad, there wasn't really anything on Blastoise in terms of a natural creature in the wild. And that's something that I'm actually going to look up, because I have a hard time believing that Blastoise, like, nothing came up for Blastoise being compared to an actual creature in the wild or a certain species. And I have a hard time believing that. So I'm going to keep searching on that. But I think that Blastoise is definitely some kind of turtle out there, or tortoise out there, that has a certain shaped head, certain styled ears and nose. I'm sure there's some kind of attribute that are very similar here. One thing about Gamora that I forgot to mention is that Gamora, which was around before Pokemon, the large kaiju turtle, really cool creature, does kind of look like a ripoff of Godzilla, but it's really hard to say that when they are so different. When one is really a turtle-esque creature and Godzilla is more of a dragon reptile, kind of makes me think of a kimono dragon. What was I saying? Oh, the Gamora, similar to Blastoise, goes back into his shell and spins around. So this is something that definitely, ties into where maybe the inspiration for some of Blastoise's moves, or I guess mannerisms would be, if that's the right word. But yeah, pretty cool stories behind Blastoise, and I'm going to dive deeper into this, because I'm sure that there's way more to be added to the story. And I'm interested if anybody else is really interested in that story of origin. I think one of the fun things people are doing now that Pokemon has become more and more popular is diving into, like, where the inspirations came from, where did the origin for these ideas come from, and a lot of that can be found through Reddit and online, and through dedicated people that are equally interested in the natural world and the environments that enjoy Pokemon, for that simple fact that, like, the same reason that I have a bearded dragon and I love reptiles and have loved them ever since I was a kid. So for me, it actually makes perfect sense where their inspirations came from. It's like if I wanted to develop a video game, I'm sure I would have made, some type of game or comic or something, based off of reptilian creatures, because I collected geckos when I was a kid. I had a crappy old aquarium that I turned into a terrarium and just filled it with whatever I could find outside. And eventually I had a huge family of geckos, and that was one of the most fun things. That's one of the best memories in my life before things started getting more complicated and became a teenager and then a young adult, and life got weird and complex, and more social. But as a kid, I just remember playing with those geckos, and so I can relate with the inspiration behind, like, the original starters being essentially pets of Japanese kids at the time. That's really, that hits home for me, and it makes me appreciate all of these creatures that much more, despite that it's just an anime and a card game. There's clearly a reason why all of this means so much to us, beyond just, like, or collecting sealed Pokemon and modern and everything is going to the moon and it's like crypto and there's so much more to it than that. And you guys know that. I think with vintage and people that can relate to vintage and collecting vintage, and like, I'm not going to lie here. My demographic based on the numbers from YouTube analytics is people in my age group. So you guys grew up like, the fam, y'all grew up in the 90s. Y'all grew up, with this stuff. Not only is it nostalgic, but I don't know. It just hits differently. The passion hits differently. Seeing all this stuff popularized once again just reminds me of the 90s. Like, I don't know about you guys. I didn't have a whole lot of Pokemon cards. One thing I did have that I held very dearly, and I don't know where it is. It's got to be somewhere at my parents' house, is a VHS tape of, and you guys have seen this. It's on YouTube. You can find it. It's basically like when they sent out the mass tapes on how to play Pokemon, you could see kids playing in New York at the championships and playing with their old vintage decks. And like, they were interviewing little kids and the kids were like, oh, well, my favorite Pokemon is whatever. And I like them for this reason. And like, this stuff takes me back to that time when I was a kid. And even though I didn't know how to play Pokemon and I wasn't even really crazy into collecting Pokemon, I didn't have any real means to collect Pokemon. My parents were kind of broke artists. I mean, let's just be honest. I grew up in a household with artists as parents, and they weren't spending any money on video games and Pokemon cards. They just weren't. That was not something that I had as a luxury. The only things I had were Yu-Gi-Oh cards when Yu-Gi-Oh became a thing and my parents were doing a little bit better. And so they could afford to bring me home like one pack on a Friday night occasionally when they would go out on date night. Or I would have video games, right? I would play on my Game Boy. That was a very special thing. Or I would play on PlayStation with my dad occasionally. Like those, and then Halo came with Xbox. And like, those were the days. But that was much more cost effective than Pokemon cards, right? These were still $3-4 a pack back in 1999. And, that was a substantial part of most people's wages at that time, right? Like in the 90s, the wages were probably $5 to $10 an hour. If you had $10 an hour, if you had a really good job, there are still jobs that don't pay 10 an hour, and that's like minimum wage essentially. Yeah, it's just there's some kind of nostalgia that comes with old cards like this that some people might not understand, but it's very real for me, and I feel like that VHS tape is a big reason for that. It's just seeing all these young kids when I was a little bit older, and I knew that I missed out, but it was still fun to watch all of them play and like talk about Pokemon. And then Pokemon kind of sizzled out. And I remember being in Target and Walmart, and there was EX series cards and packs and boxes and decks, and no one wanted them. I bought a couple of the decks so that I could play, because that was really the only Pokemon related stuff there. Like, if I was a little more savvy as a little kid, I would have convinced my parents to go to like game shops and like buy me Pokemon cards that I wanted. But even then, it wouldn't be the way that it is now, right? Like, I appreciate this stuff now because I'm buying it with my hard-earned money as an adult, right? That's something that, like, even if I had these cards as a kid or as like an adolescent, like a teenager, young adult, I was still buying Pokemon cards. It's just different now. I can really appreciate it as an adult, and I know that, at the end of the day, this stuff is kind of priceless. And I know that there are others of you out there that are going to feel the same way, that this stuff is priceless, and it just brings back so many good memories and good vibes and good energy. I'm sorry, guys. I'm drooling over Blasty right now. And I think soon it's going to be time to replace the crystals and put the guys that started it all, the first edition base set cards that I love the most, put those up there on the shelf. But we're going to take one last look at Blastoise, and then we're calling it a day. I just really, really wanted to share this guy with you guys. I also want to point out, I am going to make a community post about this. I'm going to make a community post about this because it's going to be crazy. We are going to open a base set unlimited, not a first edition, but a base set unlimited pack we're going to open one of those from my already open box, but I've got 8 packs in there, or 9 packs in there left. They're all heavies. They all have hollows in them. We are going to open one of those at 5,000 subscribers. We're right around the corner from there. We need 100 plus subs, and then boom, we are there at 5K. We're going to open up one of those packs. It's going to be really exciting. And it's going to be the first time I've ever opened one of those packs. I never had them as a kid. So this is going to be me kind of living my childhood fantasies. That's going to be awesome. And I can't wait to share that with you guys. So I'm going to make a community post about that probably tomorrow. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Have a fantastic day. And I look forward to doing another topic tomorrow. Peace. Oh, wait. Tomorrow is actually the live stream. So I will see you guys. We're going to open. I couldn't get any more 151 in for retail. I guess I'm going to end up opening the only extra booster bundles that I have so that we can have a good time tomorrow night. Anyways, so that'll be fun. We'll open up some more 151. We are short. And again, this is, guys, this is why I love 151. For the same reasons that I love WotC and base set. It just brings all those good memories back up. And now as an adult, I collect 151 because I didn't get to collect base set as a kid. So it's very, very important. And I think anybody that's in this hobby right now that is collecting 151 should really recognize how lucky we are to have a really good set like that. I don't think people really understand the gravity of 151 and how incredible of a set it is, bringing all that nostalgia back up to the surface. Anyways, peace out, guys. I gotta get to work.